We're live. That was quick.
All right, welcome back. This week we're back with another great topic, and this one I'm excited about. Not that I'm not excited about all the other topics, but I'm definitely getting more calls about barking, all types of barking. So whether the dog's barking in the home because they're in the crate or behind a gated area, dogs barking on walks, dogs barking at things out the window, all types of different barking I've been getting calls about. So I figured, let's talk to people about this. Let's talk to them about the different types of barking and what to do about it.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
yeah. You saying you have something to say? No, no, jump on in, Scott.
No, I know Archie's been barking a lot more lately. I don't know if it's just the
Yeah,
season or whatnot. And he has run-ins with other dogs, and then whatever. We had like one walk where we apparently ran into every dog in the neighborhood, so that was exciting.
yep,
But yeah, barking at people in the
mhm,
hall, all those different things.
yep.
And I know there's like 5 core different types of barking. So what
Mhm.
are those 5? Like, just
So,
recap, just
yeah.
quick summary. What are
Just
each
so
5?
recap of them, there's boredom barking.
Yeah,
We'll go get into all of them. Boredom
yeah, for
barking,
sure. Yeah,
separation anxiety barking, barrier frustration barking, demand barking. That's a really big one, and watchdog barking. Those are the 5 different types of barking. And so the
okay.
question is, which one is your dog?
Yeah. So we're going to
Yep,
help you figure that out. So the first
yep.
one, tell us, what is boredom barking? What is that?
So boredom barkings, ideally, when your dog's left alone, they don't have anything to do. They don't have any type of mental stimulation, meaning there's no toys to play with. There's not much around. And so they just bark because they're bored. And so sometimes I hear, my dog's just sitting there barking out the blue, and I don't know why. That's because
Yeah.
they make me bored. And so I always encourage, clients and dog owners, take a look at your dog's daily schedule. Make sure they're getting enough exercise. And definitely, if you're working from home and stuff, give them something to do while you're working from home, or just in general, so that they're not so that they're not bored. And I always tell folks to think about it. What if someone told you, hey, go sit over there for like 8 hours while I go do work, and then you're like, okay, what
Yeah.
am I going to do? You'll end up getting in trouble too. So always
Yeah.
think about it. If your dog doesn't have anything to do, they're going to be barking and they're going to get in trouble. So a quick tip for that is just make sure that your dog has a lot of enrichment and things to do so they're not bored.
Yeah. And
Yep.
one really easy game is the towel game. Take even just a kibble, get a beach towel,
Oh,
roll it
yes.
up, fold it up. And now they have to nose through it. It takes Archie, it takes him like 15, 20 minutes to get through the whole thing. And then you can
Yep.
do it again. And then you have peace and quiet for like 20 minutes. You can even do that for like their lunch or whatever if you really want to. So it's a
Yep.
little
And it's
quick
so
thing that I
funny.
noticed.
Exactly. And I was working with a client last night, and she was talking about how, the schedule's working phenomenal for the dog. We got her on the schedule, so the dog's not
Yeah.
on board. But then she was like, there's this time where he just is crazy at night and we're trying to relax. And the same way we were talking about as a towel, rolling something up, you could also just toss treats around the house
Yeah.
within
Yeah.
sight, because you don't want them to get in trouble, like whatever
Yeah.
area is sitting for, and just let them search for the treats. And
Yeah.
sniffing's very exhausting. And so that will mentally stimulate your dog and work their brain, and as well tire them out as well, and then they're not barking as well. So
Yeah,
giving
that's an
that a
awesome
go.
solution, especially when you're tired as well on yourself. You want them to just go do something, right? So
Exactly.
another type of barking, a little bit different,
Yep.
separation anxiety barking. So what's that all
Yep.
about?
So separation anxiety barking is basically your dog is barking because they're alone. Whether you left the house, whether you went inside to use whether you went to use the bathroom, it doesn't even matter. It's just that they are left alone in some various forms, and then it causes them to get anxious, and then that's when the barking comes into tow. And some of the things that come up, your dog gets stressed out, so you may even notice that your dog's drooling, they may pant and stuff like that. But barking is definitely a common sign of separation anxiety, and dogs may even get destructive. And so with the separation anxiety barking, it can be tricky. So some things you can do is, if your dog's barking because they're alone, or because so most of the time, let me just backtrack. Most of the time I find that with separation anxiety barking, even if the dog, no. So separation anxiety, I'm trying to give you guys some great tips here. So
Yeah.
separation anxiety barking, if they're barking because your dog's alone. If you know that your dog's barking because they're alone, you can try keeping them with you, and just until you teach them or train them how to be alone. That's not something that's just going to work its way out. Ideally, you may have to call in a trainer to resolve that type of barking, but in an interim, you can keep your dog with you. And also, if they're, you can start getting them used to being alone by doing small moments of separation. So what that means is it doesn't have to be like 1 minute or even 5 minutes, even 30 seconds. So if you're going to use the bathroom, let your dog stay outside the door. If you're going to check the mailbox and it's right outside the door, let your dog stay. So start small moments like that of them being alone. And another thing that I do with my clients too to start home alone train is feeding your dog in a certain area, specifically a confinement area like a gate or a crate area, and get them used to doing something fun while they're alone too, so they'll want to spend more time alone. So those are all little tips that you can do to help work on separation anxiety barking moving forward.
That makes sense. And I guess especially if you really are able to identify it as separation anxiety, you want to reach out to a trainer. Quick plug for Down for Paws. We do have an very thorough online program for separation anxiety, but at the very least, no matter what route you go, if you really are able to diagnose that, you definitely want to have a trainer helping you, whichever way, whether it's online program, in person, whatever works for you and your lifestyle. But you definitely want to look into that a little more. So that's that. Moving forward, barrier frustration barking. This is a new one. I haven't heard this one before. So what's this?
I would say that's like the top tier, the barking calls that I get. Okay. So barrier frustration means that your dog is frustrated by being confined behind some type of barrier. And the most common causes are being confined behind a gate, and dogs have fear of missing out. And so they feel frustrated because they can't get from behind that gate. Frustration from being crated even, leaving the dog too long in the backyard, and you'll see them scratching at the door and stuff, and then they start barking to get in. Dogs being left alone in cars, or even on a leash in the backyard for a long time, or just a leash in general, where they're frustrated because there's some type of barrier in between them that's keeping them from doing what they want to do, and so therefore they start barking. And so one thing you could do with your dog is make sure that you spend time with them, like I said, behind these barriers, having fun, creating a positive association behind being created, or even behind a gated area. So what that means, like tossing treats, letting them sniff in that area, feeding them all the meals in that area. Most dogs do like food. There are some that don't, but generally they're excited to get their meals throughout the day. So feeding them in that area will work. And also just keeping note of, if you do have your dog in a gated area or crate, and you're like, okay, my dog's fine, be mindful of how long you're keeping them in there. Not saying that all dogs are going to bark when they're behind a barrier, but when it becomes too long of a time, that's when they get frustrated. So just be mindful of when your dog starts to bark, and not keeping them behind that barrier too long.
That makes sense. Or keep an eye on the timing and that sort of thing. They might just be saying, "Hey, I've been here forever, so please, let's go."
Exactly.
Right? Yep. Okay. Next one is one that I know Archie does a lot. If he wants us to go out, if we tell him we're going somewhere, he's very excited. Or if it's kind of like, it's not boredom barking, but he's like telling us he needs to do something. It's demand barking. So tell us all about demand barking.
That's up there in the top two too. No pun intended. Demand barking. So demand barking, believe it or not, that's something that us as humans cause for our dogs. Is not something that dogs just start right away. They're always trying to communicate with us. So demand barking's ideally your dog barking because they essentially want something from you. And they try to tell us politely, and ideally I always talk about body language with my clients. And so ideally your dog will come up to you and they'll just look at you. And if you don't pay them any mind, look at them immediately, then what do? They start whining. And then when they start whining, if we don't pay them any attention, then they have to up the ante. And that's when a barking comes in. And they're like, oh, hey, Archie, what do you want? And so we're only noticing them when they bark. But when they come up to us and sit and with those nice googly eyes, that's ideally when we should give them attention. But when that doesn't happen, they bark. And the reason why they do it again, dogs do at work. And so they're like, ooh, that got their attention. I'm just going to continue demand barking for things. And voila, now you created a dog that demands barks. And so demand barking, you actually can train your dog to actually, wait and ask for things nicely again. So when your dog's demand barking at you, you don't want to give them any type of attention. So you don't want to turn to them immediately like, oh, Archie, what do you want? You don't want to turn your body. You just want to continue writing or cooking or doing whatever you wanted, whatever you're doing in that moment. And then as soon as your dog stops, you wait like 1 to 2 seconds and then you turn and give them attention. So you rewarded them for the quietness and not the actual barking. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And so it does take a little bit. It may increase, the barking may increase before it gets better. But if you just wait and reward your dog for the silence each and every time, they'll go back up to, coming back up to you with the googly eyes, sitting and waiting for stuff. And then you'll know after all that went down, like, hey, I probably should be giving them some attention. But that's a quick. Exactly. But that's what demand barking's all about.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And I like that tip of just wait that 1 to 2 seconds, they're quiet. And now we're retraining them to be quiet. And even though we know they got our attention, but just take it out a notch. So the next one is one that probably happens to most people in houses. But for me living in a condo, I believe it actually happens to Archie when he hears someone in the hallway and he'll bark at the door. And it's basically watchdog barking.
Yeah. And we'll go back to the apartment stuff, but yes, watchdog barking is just what it sounds like. Your dog going up to the window or going up to wherever they heard the noise and just watching. Some dogs will make it like their favorite pastime and sit at the window and wait for people, dogs, trucks, or whatever they're barking at to pass by, and they bark. And what Scott was talking about is a lot of times you don't think about this unless you do live in like a condo or apartment setting, but it doesn't have to be dogs barking out the window. They could be barking at various noises they hear around the house. So that's another type of barking and stuff like that. That's not quite watchdog barking, but it's almost similar. So what can we do about watchdog barking? So let's talk about some things you can do to manage and kind of cut back on the watchdog barking. So just keep in mind, if they're barking at things out the window and those things come by all the time, like dogs and people, just try, if you have it, close in the shades. You want to think about visual barriers in your house. If you don't have like curtains like this, just think about creating some type of maybe gated area where your dog cannot get to that window that they're barking at, so that they're not practicing that behavior. So just try going around, closing the shades. And also people are like, well, I want to keep my window open. I want to, look out my window. I want my dog to be able to do it. And what I tell folks is, your neighborhood, think about those high volume times when you do have people and dogs walking around, close your shades thin. There's no need to keep them closed all day if there's not things that your dog's not barking at out the window. But that's another thing you just try closing off the visual barriers. If you have a dog and you're living in a condo or apartment, you're thinking about like the ears and stuff like that, them hearing different things. So what I do recommend, aside from training to help that, is turning on some music. If you can hack it, turn on some music very low, drowning out the sound. You can also use white noise as well to muffle out the sound. It's all about creating some type of, not barrier, but what is it called? Like just drowning out noise. Sound barrier. Yeah, exactly. Visual barrier is creating some type of sound barrier so they're not hearing. But those are some things that you would do for watchdog barking. Aside from that, training watchdog barking, you could also train your dog for recall. So when they do bark, they can come back to you. I know my dog, he'll bark at people walking by, but like I tell folks at the same time, I can call him away and he'll stay away. So it's not like that persistent barking. I don't mind him barking because I want him to warn me someone's there. It only becomes a problem when I get that question a lot. Should my dog be barking? I'm like, it's up to you. I don't mind it because my dog warns me someone's there. It's only, I think, when it becomes persistent, then it's like, okay, it's bothering the neighborhood. But other than that, those are some things you could do. Recalls, go to mats so they can come from the window and stuff like that.
For sure. And I think like anyone who's walked around a neighborhood with their dog can probably spot the other watchdog barkers in the neighborhood because their dogs are barking at our dog that is on the walk. So it's always exciting to see those dogs. So
you're like, I'm not alone. Yeah, exactly.
Much, right. So awesome. So those are basically our 5 types of barking. Are there any kind of like overall tips that you want to give people for barking and that sort of thing, or Anything you want to
Oh,
just
definitely.
find,
So
close out
I
with?
know there's a lot of frustration with unwanted dog behavior, barking, jumping, whatever it may be, especially the barking, especially with a lot of people working from home. There's two things I want you to know. Cut your dog a little bit of slack if they've been practicing this behavior for a long time. It's known that dogs who practice unwanted behaviors like jumping, barking, and stuff for long periods of time, it takes a little bit longer to change. And we're no different. I mean, if we're trying to lose weight or we want to cut back on eating chocolate, it just doesn't happen right away. It kind of happens in
Yeah.
baby steps. So, once you start the process, like you watch this live, like, great, let's do this. It's going to work right away. It may work right away. It may take some time, but just cut your dog some slack just because they may have practiced it for a long time. And just staying consistent with what you're doing with the barking and kind of reducing it all is going to all play into getting that barking reduced a lot faster.
That makes a
Yep.
ton of sense. Awesome.
Yep.
So if you have any questions about Bark or anything you want to reach out to Pam with, there's a website, our socials, Instagram, Facebook. Hit her up. Any questions you might have, comment on this post.
Yep.
Tons of channels. She's very easy to get to DM and that sort of thing. If you have
Yep.
questions, and anything else you want to close out with, Pam?
No, I think that's it. I hope everyone learned a lot more about barking and what type of barker your dog is. Drop them in the comments. I would love to know what your type of barker your dog is.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, we'll hit you next week with another awesome live, and hope everyone has a great week.
All right.